Welcome to Number for Phonies, episode 121.
Continuing with books worth reading, and this episode's title is Emotional Blackmail: When the People in Your Life Use Fear, Obligation, and Guilt to Manipulate You.
And this book was recommended to me by my friend Julie, and she started talking about being in the fog. So fear, obligation, and guilt are
the acronym for FOG. Nice.
So have you ever had anyone in your life that kind of emotionally overpower you and make you feel defeated?
Absolutely have.
With this book, they make you feel bewildered and powerless. And we kind of keep our focus on the other person's needs at the expense of our own. And we relax into the temporary illusion of safety we've created for ourselves just by giving in
all the time.
We've avoided conflict, confrontation, and the chance for what we would consider to be a really healthy relationship.
And in families of origin, if you're a child, you're kind of powerless to figure out how to get out of this dynamic.
And it's almost, sometimes they'll label, oh, you just didn't understand me, or there's been miscommunication. But it's
just a mistake.
Yeah, it's really actually about the one person getting their own way at the expense of another and their power struggles. So emotional blackmail is a powerful form of manipulation in which people closer to us threaten, either directly or indirectly, to punish us if we don't do what they want.
And at the heart of any kind of blackmail is one basic threat, which can be expressed in many different ways. If you don't believe the way I want you to, if you don't behave the way I want you to, you will suffer.
Yeah, believe or behave.
Right.
So FOG is a shorthand for fear, obligation, and guilt. And the tools of blackmailers trace making us afraid to cross them, obligated to give them their way, and terribly guilty if we don't.
So they threaten. They're frightened.
Having difficulty speaking to them.
They threaten to make your life difficult if you don't do what they want.
And they could threaten to end the relationship. They can tell you or imply that you are causing them to neglect, hurt, or like that you're causing their depression somehow. And they always want more no matter how much you give. They assume you will give it to them. They ignore, discount your own feelings. They make all these promises. So anything that makes you feel that way, consistently labeling you as selfish and bad and greedy and unfeeling and all that.
Yeah, when they gaslight you.
Right. Yeah. Shower you with approval when you give them and
when you give in.
And take it away when you don't. And sometimes they can use money, like that would be
interesting.
So when we come to some kind of clarity, we're realizing that blackmailers skillfully mask the pressure they're applying. We often experience it in ways that make us question our own perception, and it is gaslighting.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You can be a person of great competence, grace, and effectiveness in many parts of your life, but you fall into the blackmail trap.
So you can be super emotionally intelligent, super high IQ, super wise and mature in life, and still fall prey.
So blackmailers have a fear of loss, a fear of change, a fear of rejection, a fear of losing power. So fear. And if you blackmail, it's a ticket to feeling safe and in charge all the time.
Yeah.
And emotional blackmail just becomes a defense against feeling hurt and afraid.
So the author defines blackmail as a transaction between two people. So our life experiences shape the automatic emotional responses that power our hot buttons.
Right. So, whether it's your parents or whatever kinds of experiences we've been through, but whenever we comply, then we're rewarding that person. And then repeated blackmail makes us feel off balance and ashamed and guilt-ridden. And so we have to take the first step down the road to change, asking the question, am I being selfish? Or am I being true to my own wants and my own priorities, and how much can I give without being resentful or depressed, and do I violate my own integrity just by giving in to a blackmailer all the time? So you have to step into this place where you diagnose actual emotional blackmail. So the first step of someone emotionally blackmailing you is that they demand, the person wants something from you. The second part of sort of the diagnosis of emotional blackmail is that you resist what they want with a no, or even a veiled no, and then they put pressure on you to change your mind. You are like insulted or degraded or pressure, or can also be cloaked in benevolence too.
Like
then there can
being
be
flooded
threats
with gifts or compliments.
There can be threats then, even veiled threats. Then you comply, and then you repeat.
Pattern over and over.
So it's basically demand, resistance, pressure, threats, compliance, repetition, and you just keep going through that cycle. And then you're involved with emotional blackmail. Manipulation becomes emotional blackmail when it's used repeatedly to coerce us into complying with the blackmailer's demands at the expense of our own
wishes and well-being. I mean, I guess emotional blackmail is kind of like an established pattern where manipulation might be a one-time attempt.
But when you're in a relationship where somebody's in doing this pattern over and over again, then you've got to set some healthy limits. So you've got to define your position, state what you need, lay out what you will and won't accept, give the other person a choice. Sometimes you have to get therapy and
then boundaries.
About what kind of behaviors you will and won't. So basically, it's about setting boundaries.
I like a quote from Adam Grant that I saw today. If someone regularly mistreats you, choosing not to be angry doesn't mean you tolerate their behavior. It means you no longer let it surprise you. Lowering your expectations is not about permitting them to be disrespectful. It's about freeing yourself from their emotional grip. So sometimes it's it's almost like the silent treatment back to them rather than engaging.
That defines emotional blackmail almost perfectly. Right? Because how do you know if someone is more interested in winning or in resolving a problem?
Right. They want, they'll talk openly about the conflict with you.
They actually are concerned with your own feelings. They find out why you're resisting. They accept responsibility for their part. But some people have to be winners at all costs.
They have to try to control everything and they'll ignore your protests and insist that their character and motives are superior to yours. And definitely they avoid taking responsibility for the problems between you.
And they're asking you maybe to do things that are unreasonable. I mean, I've been in situations where I feel like in the end I got manipulated into doing a whole bunch of things I shouldn't have done.
Right.
And so you have to decide for yourself, how much flexibility do I have and how much do I allow in a relationship? And you have to really, when you start to get that gut feeling that things are not going right, you need to look at things like neediness and possessiveness and, sometimes I was in a relationship before where I'll give the example of I got healthy and lost some weight and the person was really hard on me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
they wanted to sabotage your progress.
Right. So, and that the balance of power seems to always be with them. And I think sometimes when you take the balance of power back, it's surprising to them for a while, but it, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm not available to do that when you have been the person who's been available to do everything.
Right.
And so the 4 faces of blackmailers are punishers, self-punishers, sufferers, and tantalizers.
So we'll kind of define, I'll give a little definition or example of each of those.
And I mean, you have to know that the book goes into
a lot of detail. Yeah. So the punisher is an active punisher. So they avoid wrath.
And we find ourselves doing things that amaze us, like lying and keeping secrets and sneaking around because we don't want to be punished by them.
Right. The self-punisher, there's high drama, hysteria, and an air of crisis surrounding the self-punishers. Nobody likes me. Why are you ignoring me? Are you angry with me?
Yeah, and I thought that you didn't like me anymore.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
And you feel like you have no choice, that you're trapped. Yeah. And then the sufferer is another thing.
So they rarely take responsibility for clearing the air or asking for what they want. They're tyrants and they make scenes quietly. They effectively activate our rescuer caretaker instinct.
Right. So they manipulate you into like doing things
for them because they're suffering.
Yeah. The tantalizer makes you jump through hoops. Relationships are a never-ending series of tests and demands, and gifts and promises are always accompanied by conditions. So the blinding fog makes our judgment become hazy. So you have fear that they'll leave you, disapprove of you, stop loving you, yell at you, make you miserable, confront you, fire you, abandon you. The person withdraws and we give in. Fear moves us into black and white and kind of catastrophic thinking, like fear of anger.
Yeah, we might have built up so much anxiety and apprehension about our own and other people's anger that it can dramatically affect our ability to stand up to blackmail. And emotional memory can keep us locked into old ways of fearful acting and reacting, even when there's nothing to currently justify it. We kind of try and aim for peace at any price. And fear flourishes in the dark, unexamined, but vividly imagined situations. So sometimes when you ruminate over and over, and
I also think that it comes from how what our family of origin, like how we were treated. And, if our parents, were, if we didn't do what they wanted, they were angry, especially as the older that you get as an adult, they punished you for not.
Right.
Then you have that ingrained fear of what's going to happen if I say no. And then obligation, love and willingness can quickly fall out of the equation when replaced by obligation and an enforced sense of duty. How nice it would be if blackmailers were as sensitive to our feelings as they want us to be to theirs.
Yeah.
So that's where it kind of switches.
And it's tricky with obligation because there's also cultural and generational sensation, like attitudes towards obligation.
Yeah.
In where I grew up, they really don't have old folks' homes. And so the expectation is that when you're old, your child will take care of you. And they don't have a rigid rule of which child. But in other cultures, it's expected that the oldest son and daughter-in-law or the oldest daughter will take care of the parents regardless. So you kind of are raised from little on with that expectation. But for us, that just seems wrong.
But I also feel like there are times when relationship becomes obligatory, when that person makes you feel like, well, why did you go off and do that with another friend? Like
are we still friends?
Yeah, are we? Well, and the question was like, how are all your other friends doing? Like, that's a weird question for people in their, older people to
adults,
adults to be exchanging. But of course, I have other friends, other than one, and different circles of friends and people that I, So it just becomes that sort of, you just start feeling funny about the way things are being worded.
Yeah. And guilt, well, there's always the joke or the saying about Catholic guilt. And I'm not Catholic, but I have Mennonite guilt and there's Jewish guilt, like often associated with religious upbringing. Guilt is an essential part of being a feeling responsible person. So it's actually kind of part of our biology and our brains.
We feel guilty about something.
It is a red flag to look and observe and be curious and think about it. But undeserved guilt is layered with blame, accusations, and paralyzing self-flagellation. We are encouraged by the blackmailer to take global responsibility for their complaints and unhappiness, and they attack our sense of self as loving, worthwhile people.
And as long as guilt dominates interaction, there's no chance for healing. So guilt wears away the trust and the intimacy that makes us want to be with the person. Of course, you don't want to be with someone who's can't accept that that you've gone out with somebody else or you've done something with somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't want to be with that person because you can't even talk about your life.
Right. Unless it circles around them.
Or you start feeling guilty.
Right.
Oh, you went shopping with that other person? Like, yes, I did, because I'm a 60-year-old woman who gets to do and be with who I want to be.
Oh, it's not high school.
No. So blackmailers use a bunch of strategies. One is called the spin, where they put like a halo around their own character and motives and splatter ours with all these doubts or even blacker mud. So they describe resistance as negative. They portray themselves as more mature. They confuse us into thinking there's something the
matter with us. And strategic blackmailers make us bad, quote unquote. They challenge our character, motives, and worth.
And then they pathologize and tell us that we must be ill or crazy or neurotic or warped or hysterical or some kind of cripple.
Yeah.
When love is in demand, one person wants more than the other. When we don't do it, our ability to love is questioned, and there's nothing wrong with you just because you don't want them as much as they want you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it has to be more balanced. So watch out for dependency, desperation, and the need to possess. Because that's all
immature. I would say if you're raising teenagers, this would be a good book to read together with them and discuss, because they are facing just because of COVID and being isolated, and then now everybody on their phones, they already have social skill challenges. Mm-hmm. But I think in relationships in school, like either boyfriend, girlfriend, or teammates or mean girl situations, whatever, friendships, I think that there are teenagers that manipulate the others very quickly.
Yeah.
And they're very subtle, and they're not even.
The emotional blackmail that I've experienced, because I think for women it's more than men.
Yeah.
Men don't sit around and think, oh, she went shopping with that other person. Like it's just not.
There might be a few guys that do, but yeah, no, I don't see it.
Typically not a man thing. I mean, so I think it's.
But maybe between men and women, or boys, like
yes,
in dating relationships, then sure. Yes,
100% in dating relationships. Like dependency, desperation, and the need to possess is definitely in dating.
Well, remember the young woman that was always calling Sebastian at the oddest times of the night, and totally desperate for, very possessive,
and almost didn't want him to be around us.
No,
what? So, and it can happen as well with authority figures who put their opinions and actions kind of beyond reproach if you don't allow them to question or challenge them.
Mm-hmm.
So even when they're, getting into situations where they're working, the more troubled the family, the more it tries to block its members when they try to become healthy. So like keep the family secret, or fear of abandonment, or exile, or punishment, or retaliation, or contempt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all pathologizing it. And it makes us question our sanity. So they enlist allies and put dangerous pressure on us and make us try to measure up to impossible standards. And they make us question our own competence.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to give an example of that right now, because I've been trying to deal with the city of Welland, and they don't like that I question them. And they do this.
Yes.
They use emotional blackmail because they try to make you question and your own competence. They don't return calls. When they do return calls.
Well, let me explain it to you because you don't understand.
I said, if one more person says that, I don't understand, like that's what they're doing to you. They're doing all this kind of fear, obligation, guilt. Like, why are you calling? You obviously don't understand. You're not competent to, make these decisions or ask these questions.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it happens in all kinds of areas of life. So it's a long book. So on October 15th, we're going to look even deeper at this.
All right.
We're going to look at the inner world of the blackmailer and how blackmailing actually takes two. It gets into more of that and more strategies to actually deal with the blackmailers and how to cut through the fog.
The fear, the obligation, and the guilt.
So that you can actually, become healthy. And it doesn't mean, I've been reading this other book called actually Emotional Maturity and Spirituality. And it's very interesting. This guy is talking about that people in churches are often emotionally immature. And so their spirituality is actually immature.
Interesting.
And it's very much like this, where if you can't,
they're stuck in an emotional blackmail loop.
Yeah, and because a person like this is emotionally immature, they can't listen to another person's viewpoint. They don't have perspective.
And then some of them rise to be the leaders of the churches, and they're still blackmailing. And that's how it slides into cults very quickly.
And that's what he's talking about. And I think some of these things happen, like this emotional blackmail kicks in when you feel lonely or you feel desperate in your life. For some people, and I believe this is more true of women than men, that they actually can't handle solitude and being alone. And so they have to, and so then when they see another woman like that, maybe they've, been involved with, or it has helped them through a hard time in their life. And then that woman starts to, kind of move on because it's been a certain period of time, or they're, whatever. Then they're like, well, where are you going? I still need you. But you can't have that kind of an emotional hold on somebody for that long time.
No. I think there's men that do that. I think there's men that do that too. Yeah. Well, I don't know if men do it too much to each other, but to women
who have experienced some kind of loss or going through some kind of crisis, that, you step in to help them, and then it just quickly sort of dissolves into this emotional blackmail. You have to be here, and I need you, and, oh, I need help with this. So then you're manipulated.
I don't know what it's called, but I think therapists and counselors encounter this where their clients become attached to them.
Yeah.
And it has a name. I don't remember. And it's not always romantic. Sometimes it's just this.
So to me, this is all very interesting. And, I've definitely experienced it in some of my, relationships. And I
not me.
I see it in relationships with women where it's kind of like, oh, you went there and you didn't let me know you were going. And I'm thinking, like, you're a 50, 60, 70-year-old woman. Like, you wouldn't go somewhere on your own.
Without reporting it to...
So it's just interesting. So we're going to go on with this topic because I believe it's a really important one. And I am in agreement with you that it would be a great book for young kids to read in high school so that they can be aware of their own behaviors and then how that, they can say, hey, wait a minute, I think you're manipulating me, or I'm going to step away from this right now because, I feel manipulated, or I feel, and just feeling that understanding of that idea of when you feel like, we talk about brain fog.
Yeah.
This is a kind of brain fog when somebody's trying to do this to you. So anyway, this is part 1, and we'll be back on October 15th for part 2. And so thanks for listening to Norn for Phonies.
And we'll see you in 2 weeks,
where we talk more about emotional blackmail.